Hi everybody, and welcome to week 4. I'm Dr. John, and you've come quite a ways on your journey. I apologize for this coming out Thursday. I was trying to create some new material for you, and sometimes when you're putting new lecture material together and new content and developing new slides and so forth, it can be like going down the rabbit hole. Back when I was at Disney, we used to always say that if you're preparing for a presentation, you always needed 3 days in order to prep for each day that you were going to be presenting, consulting, working with a client. So, for example, if I were going into a 3-day workshop with a group, Disney IT or Disney Finance, I would prepare about 9 business days in order to get myself ready. That's developing material, looking at the material, and so forth. We try to do that a lot faster in academia. I wake up and I say, I've got an idea for some new content that I think will help the students based on what I'm seeing. And lo and behold, it's several days later before that's actually ready to be shown. So that is the scoop on why your Zoom session is actually today. I had done a Zoom session on Tuesday and then didn't like what I saw and started to reduce some of the content, and here we are. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? We're going to do 3 things. One, I want to provide a quick review of how we got here. It's always good to figure out where we are. In organization development circles, there's an exercise that's called the Road to Abilene. And in the Road to Abilene, you basically have a number of people sitting around on a porch in a country Texas town and house, and somebody on the porch that's a family, and they say, let's go to Abilene for dinner. And the father looks up and says, why would we want to go to Abilene? And somebody says, well, there's a great restaurant there. And then somebody else says, well, if so-and-so goes, I'll go. And all of a sudden you have this back and forth. And about several hours later, when they're on their way back from dinner in Abilene, somebody says, why did we go to dinner in Abilene? And what happens is that a lot of times we end up somewhere with no real understanding of how we got there. So, for this week, I wanted to make sure that we connected all the dots for you. And that's going to involve going back and also talking about plans and reports. And finally, I'm going to show you how this all matches up to the rubric. And I think you'll be in great shape to finish off your week 4 presentation. Now, of course, always make sure that you're doing additional research, that you're going out and benchmarking and looking for best-in-class ideas, and you're pulling the references for those into a reference page on your slide presentation. But even more importantly, you're citing that information that you're using throughout your presentation. That's called due diligence, and I've talked about this before, that when I was a young vice president and I made a presentation, I had done some research and a report about going into a brand new market. We were based in Lexington, Kentucky, and I had an opportunity to go into Evansville, Indiana. And I did a ton of research. I put together a great proposal, and I presented it to my boss, who was the president of the company. And his response was, Renesky, if this is just your opinion, you won't be a vice president for much longer. I think he was pulling my leg, because I think he knew who I was and what I do. And he wasn't disappointed in terms of the amount of due diligence research I had done on moving into Evansville. We were not only successful with that new store going into Evansville, but a short period afterwards we opened up a second store because the market was so strong. All right, enough of that. Let's get into some of the details here. Let's take a quick review of how we got here. So if you'll remember, back in week 1, we talked about persona development. Now let's look at persona development in a slightly different way. And as you can see from this diagram, this model, that the persona is really kind of right in the middle. It is the linchpin for really everything that we do. How do we get to the persona is by understanding the target market, then by doing segmentation, where we're breaking up and looking at our different segments. And then we then use that persona to develop strategy, but oftentimes we do it by first developing a customer journey roadmap. Now, I did not have you develop the customer journey roadmap, but what does that talk about? Well, it takes a look at the persona and asks, what are the tactics that a customer sees and how do they interact with those tactics as they move along the marketing funnel to ultimately buy and become hopefully a brand advocate down the road. I would encourage you to always link your persona to the roadmap and to your funnel for your organization. And then you get to the strategy point where you can set goals and then ask the question of how you will achieve those business objectives as we move forward. So you've actually seen this in your feedback. This is the pillars of segmentation, and this is how we build our personas. We want to understand the geographics, the demographics, the psychographics, and the behaviors that our target audience exhibits. And there, of course, is an example of a persona. Now, a couple things. Always make your personas personal, meaning they should represent a fictional person, because that's who we market to. We market to people. Unless we're a business, then we market to business, in which case your personas are going to be a business. And actually, by the way, if you do have a B2B model, one of the things that you want to do is drop down another layer and identify who at the business you really need to be working at or working with, because ultimately it's people that make the decisions within the business as well. There's a great book out there called Accelerants, and it is all about getting to and finding those decision makers and consequently then working with them down the road. Another great book is The Complex Sale, and I'm trying to remember the author's name. It's not on the tip of my mind right at the moment, but The Complex Sale is all about how do you use LinkedIn to make a business sale. And in case we haven't had this conversation, let me just say LinkedIn is a wealth of information. It is how we build a relationship with potential customers. Now, we can do that with a lot of digital tools, but the information that we need to start with is based in LinkedIn. All right, so coming back to the persona, what's key? Well, it's based on audience segmentation. Our header information is all about our fictional person. We want to then create a detailed background and that talks about where that person is in the segmentation, and then ultimately the end goals. In other words, how does your brand solve a problem or provide an advantage to your persona? In other words, how does it meet a need for your persona? Let's talk about the funnel. The marketing funnel shows us how somebody ultimately moves through our marketing efforts and to a point where they're converted and they become a customer. Now, I've talked to you about four stages to the funnel: awareness, lead generation, conversion, and ultimately advocacy. But there's a lot of different variations to the funnel. I like to think of those because I think those are pretty generic. But remember, what we're ultimately doing is we're taking the funnel and then applying tactics to it, and that's what gives us our customer journey roadmap. So we've got goal setting. The top tier goal are those 4 basic categories of goals that I talked about earlier. We talked about channel goals, which is how you will achieve your top tier goals. So you identify the top tier, and then you say, how am I going to do this? Then in week 3, which I haven't taken a look at, but I will later today, you have your campaign goals. And how will you achieve the channel strategy goals, or the top tier goal is by the campaign goals. And then ultimately, how will you measure your success is by identifying KPIs. And KPIs, again, are an answer to how. So while strategy often deals with what, answering the question of how gets into the meat and potatoes of what we're doing as marketers. Now, remember, all your goals must be SMART goals. So every goal must have all 5 components: specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. By the very fact that it's answering the question how, we know it's going to be relevant. And what are those goals? Well, we talked about awareness goals, lead generation, conversion goals, and advocacy. All right, so let's jump a little bit and get into the digital marketing plan. Because essentially what you're developing this week is, you've got a lot of the components for the digital marketing plan, but we're going to take it a step further and actually get into the campaign. So the purpose of a digital marketing plan is to provide a roadmap to set trackable goals, identify strategies, the how, ensure all marketing activities lead back to the main business objectives. That's where we get into the SMART component and that relevant. And that, again, should ladder up. It should build up with the goal of ultimately moving customers through our funnel. So basically, when we take a look at the roadmap for the customer journey and then ultimately reporting, what are we talking about? Well, in each area of the funnel, and this is just a little bit different, I've taken lead generation and taken that out and replaced it with interest and consideration. You know, the funnel can be very fluid, meaning that in this particular example, interest and consideration, what is the line? What is the determining factor to say somebody has gone from interest to consideration? It's vague. And it's something that you as a marketer ultimately have control of and develop. All right, so in awareness, if we want to get people into the awareness part of the funnel, we can have new media campaigns. You know, it could be awareness could occur as a result of ZMOT, Google's term for the zero moment of truth, which is when somebody sits down at a keyboard and searches. How do we build interest? Well, company website, or it could be through some form of new media campaign. Consideration, again, through SEM and SEO, and ultimately maybe a landing page where we have an online sign up. Same with conversion. The landing page could actually convert right there. It doesn't necessarily need to be a sign up for a mailing list or a brochure or something. It could be the purchase, and again, we would see this through a landing page. So these are just some tactics, and for the overall, but recognize that ultimately, if we're running a new media campaign, we've got elements of all this. Just as if we were running an SEM, it's all linked. So we have to involve everything all together. It's got to work cohesively. And ultimately, as I said, you know, we can take this funnel and very easily change it to the funnel that I've been talking about, where we have the green bar be conversion and at the very end advocacy. It works the same way. All right, let's talk a little bit about plans and reports and what are the differences and how do they link with each other. So marketing plans are where we communicate what we're doing. And we'll talk about what the various aspects are of a well-rounded, best-in-class marketing plan. In essence, it has an executive summary, market analysis, competitive analysis, target audience, objectives, marketing strategies, and KPIs. So, a little bit more detail as to which each of those areas are concerned with. We're actually going to be focusing on the KPI section, but the thing to understand is that KPIs are really the result of a measurement plan, and that's what we're going to be looking at in week 4. So here's a company, lipstick.com, just an example, and some possible KPIs that they might be looking at. Percent of new visitors, video views, if they've got video that they're on the website that they want people to look at. Perhaps they have a focus on the referring traffic sources, which that might be something that you would consider because you would want to see referring traffic source from, example, the blog of a new media influencer. Sales and conversion rates by category, email open and conversion rates, category performance. This could be everything from sales to videos to views. Sales and conversion of new versus existing customers. That's information that you would see from your website and the analytics platform that you're using on your website. Ultimately, I think what you're going to find as you go through and establish your KPIs, there may be some manual items that you look at, but I want you to dig into Google Analytics and take a look at what reporting is available in Google Analytics, because ultimately you want to bring people to your website. And if you've got analytics, whether it's Google or Adobe or some other analytics, maybe an enterprise analytics package like Dynatrace, what happens is that now you're collecting that, and the cost of you collecting that is minimal. Anything that you collect manually, you have a challenge with the accuracy and the cost to collect it. So that's why we like to see wherever we can use an analytics program to capture that data. All right, so let's talk about these. The marketing plan. You want to set trackable goals, plan strategies, and ensure all your marketing activities lead back to the main business objectives. The measurement plan is based on the plan's objectives, identifies which KPIs you're going to use in your report, and then which metrics you'll use to measure the KPIs. So what's the difference between a KPI and a metric? Well, all KPIs are metrics, or I should say, but not. It's not the reverse. So in other words, not all metrics are KPIs, but all KPIs are definitely metrics. A KPI is the metric that you identify that says this is going to tell us how we performed against this goal. So it's a metric that's specifically aligned to a goal. And ultimately, you want to identify which platform and which data sources you're going to pull each of these metrics. Why? Well, because you don't want to get into, and I'll share this a little bit later, you don't want to get into a situation where you're pulling in order to show you found data sources, let me put it this way, that you can use that are not the best data sources, but they put your marketing effort in the greatest light possible. No, you want to lay the cards down, the good, the bad, the ugly, because even if it's ugly results, what does that say? A good marketer is going to say, all right, we went here last time. That tells us we can eliminate that, and we need to go in direction B, C, or D. We collect that information, and then ultimately we're going to put a report together that we're going to give to our boss, to our client. And the report ultimately is going to tell how good we did as far as our marketing plan. It's about measuring the results of the plan to make better decisions, to make stronger investments and to develop better strategies. All right, let's take another dive. So if we don't do the measurement planning, we can have data overload. Where do we go to get the data? We can pull it from every data point available, extrapolate it, twist it, and ultimately we're not going to be in a good shape in order to provide a good value back to our boss, our client, the banker, whoever it may happen to be, if we're doing this for ourselves. And if we don't plan what we want, we may miss opportunities to put the appropriate tags or pixels to a site, to an ad, to a press release, or given to a particular influencer in order to track. And finally, the benefits of measurement planning: we ensure that the objectives and KPIs are measurable, and we're setting expectations with our client, our leader, our banker, etc. So what are the components of a good measurement plan? The summary of the plan's objectives and associated KPIs, the list of metrics you'll use to measure each of those KPIs, and a list of the platform data sources you will use in the plan and which metrics will come from each. I would go one step further and talk about how you're actually going to measure it. Are you going to take a starting measurement, and then when the campaign is over, take an ending measurement? Those are things that you would want to do and report on as part of your measurement plan. And I think that was everything I had there. So let's get out of this and let's go to the rubric. And I'm going to blow this up. All right, so we've talked before about what the document layout should look like, how you start with a table of contents and provide a context slide to explain why we're in this meeting, why are we looking at this presentation, and this is also a good chance to say where you've been. Then we talk about goals. Well, you want to come back and make sure that you're stating your goals, and at the same point in time, now you're showing the metrics. And this is important. You also want to provide the timetable for how you're going to, how is all this going to happen? So the goals section should encompass a recap of the goals, the basic information with regard to the metrics. It can be high level, but answering that question of how, and then the timeline. Now we're going to get into an explanation. Now here's where I would go back and I would show the alignment back to the business objectives. I'd show the campaign goal again, and then I would make sure that I'm answering and explaining those metrics. Why are we tracking these metrics? What do you hope to learn? What do you hope to do? And explain how each metric is supporting that larger business objective. This doesn't mean just say it is. You need to explain why it is and how you chose that particular metric. Again, we talked about the references and citations. Make sure that you're using Think Like a Rockstar. By the way, Matt Collier has a lot of good information with regard to this in the book, so there's one of your sources. And if you missed the late submission, if you missed the submission, this is your week 4. There is no opportunity to turn this in late. This has got to be in by Sunday night. Okay? Grades will come out next week, final grades. All right, I think that's everything I got for you. If you got any questions, don't hesitate to give me a shout. Have a great day. This is Dr. John. Bye now.